Tiffany Cloud. Welcome to The Storm, and thank you for watching today on WYLN 35. The election is just days away, and today I'm joined by Matt Connolly. He's a candidate for Congress in the 17th Congressional District. Matt, you've been on the show before. Thank you so much for coming back on The Storm.
Always great to be here, Tiffany.
Happy to have you here. Getting down to the wire. Are you ready?
6 days, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for you. And this actually, the show is going to air right up to Election Day, so it'll be shorter than 6 days in some instances.
Great to talk to the folks. The more the better.
Okay. Before we dive into your policy positions, and I really want to do a lot of policy discussion in this show so you can really help the voters understand the differences between you and your opponent. But before we do that, I'd like you to tell the audience just a bit about Matt Connolly, the man.
Well, I'm 51 years old. I have a wonderful 16-year-old daughter who is the light of my life. I'm a guy who has lived the American dream. Since I was 6 years old, wanted to be a race car driver. You know, some people want to be an astronaut, football player, whatever. And I never stopped working towards that. And I achieved my dream in my early 20s. And up until 2012, I was a professional race car driver and team owner. And along the way, it's amazing what you learn when you follow your dreams. You learn about self-reliance. You learn about really the only thing that's keeping you from achieving your goals is usually just you. You know, I don't believe in bad luck or good luck. I believe that fortune favors the well-prepared. And it's funny, the harder you work, the luckier you get. But I'm a pretty simple guy. I love the country, love the freedom, love the way it was founded, and I see it being threatened. And I'm not a guy who sits around and complains. I take action. And that was why I said, you know what, I've got to run for office.
Well, I like that because I always say at the end of my show, don't complain about it, do something about it. So you've done something about it.
I have done something about it. And no matter how this turns out, you know what, you can only do so much, exactly. And I'm giving it my absolute best.
Well, I think that's terrific.
Yep.
Is it correct, Matt, in describing you as a constitutional conservative? Is that how you would describe yourself?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Conservative first, Republican second, yes.
Okay, help the audience who may not be familiar with what that means understand
if you look at the founding of this nation, we declared our independence, we had to go through Revolutionary War, and then we had what was called the Articles of Confederation, which was a way to try to get these newly formed states to work together. It didn't really work. So then we came out with the Constitution, 1787. That put everything in a really nice balance. The federal government, the local government, the state government, what the people's rights were, what the federal government could and could not do to you, all of those things. And we took off like a rocket. So less than 100 years later, 1882, we now surpassed every other country in the world as the greatest superpower economically. And that was only because people knew that they were free, that their rights were protected, that their borders were secure, and that the government could not knock on their door and go through their things without a search warrant. That they were protected from the government, and that's so important, from the government. What's happened since then, starting mostly in the early 1900s, was the government decided they wanted to have a more active role in our lives. Now, some people might have thought they were trying to make things better, but as we can see, especially in the last 8 years, it's been anything but better. The debt has skyrocketed. As a matter of fact, our national debt has gone from 10 trillion to 20 trillion in just 8 years. They're spending this money to try to fix things that the people should fix. The problem is they're not making it any better. Obamacare is a perfect example. So the Constitution has the line that the Constitution set out between the role of the government and what the people are allowed to do as free people has gotten so blurry, it's non-existent anymore. And that's where our problems come from. So I am a constitutional conservative.
Okay, and we are going to get into Obamacare shortly, but before we get into Obamacare, how would you describe, I mean, obviously you're running against an incumbent congressman who is a Democrat. Would you describe him as a moderate? Would you describe him as a progressive? Would you describe him as something else?
He is a progressive liberal Democrat. And it's been scored. There's iVoter guides out there. Lots of stuff online, which I love about this election cycle. I'm scored as very conservative. He is scored as extremely liberal.
So a big difference between the two of you.
Yes.
Okay, and let's outline some of those differences. And we're going to start with Obamacare. Not long ago, we got news that Obamacare premiums are going to be skyrocketing, something that really isn't a big surprise to a lot of us. We all knew that this day was coming. In Pennsylvania, they could go up as
63%.
63, is that the latest numbers?
That's the latest number, yeah.
Okay, and I know that it also varies depending upon what plans people have.
Exactly.
Whatever it is exorbitant.
Proof that the government can fix something until it's truly broken, yeah.
What is your position on the Affordable Care Act relative to the position of your opponent?
I believe it has to be completely repealed, every word of it. Every word of it. My opponent says two things. A, it didn't go far enough, and B, history will smile on it. Well, I don't know how much farther he wants it to go, and I honestly don't know who is smiling right now, but he is a big government proponent. He wants government involved in every aspect of our lives. I think the free market and free people making their own choices about what's best for them. Honestly, can you spend your money the best way, or do you want the government to take it and decide how to spend it? That's basically what Obamacare is. They're taking as much money as they can, they're trying to then redistribute it, and the people who are getting hurt the most are the ones who can least afford it.
And one of the things as a follow-up to that your opponent might argue is, well, what about all of these wonderful people, though, that have coverage now that didn't have coverage before?
They always had a form of coverage with Medicaid and Medicare. The problem is all they've done is they've changed the point of pain from, it used to be the working poor were the ones who were struggling with health insurance. Now those people that get the subsidies, now it's the middle class who all of a sudden only have the illusion of insurance. Because when you went from a $94 plan like I used to have and an $1,800 deductible, all very manageable, to a $450 plan and an $8,000 deductible, I don't have $8,000 sitting around to eat up first before I get any benefit. So all they did was simply take that movement from the lowest income earners to now the middle class and make us feel the pain of having improper health insurance. If we were to allow companies to truly compete for our business, and if we were to know how much doctor visits cost, and if we were to have tax-free health savings accounts, then we would spend our money like we spend it on our cell phone plan, on our cable plan, on our internet plan, on our home car insurance. We would have a lot better decision making, and they would cater to us. And that's what competition does. It makes everything more or less expensive, and it makes services better.
Okay. In the past, you've been on my show, and you suggested that your opponent doesn't have a strong record of getting things done in the Congress.
No,
he may argue,
right,
well, he's in a Republican Congress, and you know, as a Democrat, it's very difficult to get things done in a Republican Congress, and it's really the Republicans' fault that he hasn't been getting his agenda through. And I'm not saying that those are his words, but that might be an argument that he would give.
That's a reasonable argument,
okay,
except that a good idea is a good idea if it comes from a Democrat or a Republican. Because if it's a truly good idea from a Democrat, the Republicans say, hey, that's a good idea. How quickly can we co-sponsor this? This is his record. He has proposed 111 bills. One has been signed into law. One. That's less than 1%. As a matter of fact, InsideGov.com, and you should go look this up, rates everybody. He is the lowest rated congressman in the United States, not just Pennsylvania, but less than 1% effective. So I understand your point, but the things that he proposes, and here's one that just really shows you who he's out to serve, and I mean serve. He's a trial lawyer. And what do trial lawyers do? They make their money with lawsuits and things. One of the first things he proposed was something called the Safe Haul Act. Now that was, right now, truckers over the road have to have insurance for liability. Their minimum is $750,000 worth of liability insurance should they be in an accident. His safe haul legislation wanted to raise that to $4.4 million. Now, we all know that trial lawyers always sue to the level of insurance. So if the limit was $750,000, they're going to sue to $750,000. But now if it's $4.4 million, well, look at that big pot of money. The problem is having a higher insurance level makes their premiums go up. Every trucker on the road is going to pay a higher premium because of Cartwright's proposed law. Now, luckily it didn't pass, but that shows you the trial lawyers are his biggest single donors, and yet first thing he does is try to make a law to increase the amount of money in the pot for them to sue for. I have a real problem with that.
Okay. While we're on the topic of your opponent, he recently got a position on the very powerful House Appropriations Committee, which works to allocate funding.
Right.
And he could certainly make an argument that this position is going to be very good helping him bring money to the 17th district, that he's had success in past bringing grant money to the district. Now he'll be able to work to allocate more monies coming to the district. He could argue that now is not a time for change, that it takes a bit of seniority to get on a committee like that you would be walking in as a freshman congressman.
You're exactly right. So let's look at two things. First of all, whose money is he bringing? He's bringing our money. He's bringing taxpayer money. It's not like his own private stash. So and the other thing is, how did he get on that? Well, Chaka Fattah, who was a senior, was just indicted, just found guilty 29 counts of corruption and other sorts of bribery and fraud and wire fraud. So he's in jail now. Okay, so Matt Cartwright is now replacing a guy who went to jail, and he's still going to be in the minority party.
Okay.
And I'm not, I'm glad he got appointed to this, but he's going to be a backbencher. He's going to be a freshman on a committee, on the Appropriations Committee. He's going to have no more input than a person from the Republican side. So I'm glad he's there. That's wonderful. It's not going to, in any material way, it's not going to affect what he can do. It's just a feather in his hat. And like I said, he's in there because the guy before him is in jail. So I wouldn't brag about that too much.
Yeah, there seems to be a tendency of people going to jail or being considered for going to jail, but I digress.
Right, exactly.
What is the most important issue you think facing our world today? I know I've had your opponent on my show in past, and he has said it's a combination of terrorism and the threat of ISIS, along with global climate change. What would you say? Well,
it's funny. I had a debate with him October 4th, and I referenced his appearance on your show. And, I said verbatim, I said, on the Tiffany Cloud show, you said, Congressman Cartwright, that climate change and terrorism are inextricably linked. And then I said, are you trying to tell us that a few degrees in temperature change has caused the rise of radical Islam and forced them to drown, burn, and behead innocent victims? And he went on saying, oh yes, I remember saying that, and it's the droughts, and it's this and it's that, and it's the oppression of them, and they're subject to all these radical ideas. And he went on about that, and I listened to him, and I just followed up, and I said, but they've been doing this for 600 years. They've been beheading people through jihad since the Middle Ages. Was there climate change back then?
Interesting.
And he said, I think it's time for the next question. So, it verbatim. So that's, I don't understand. So my biggest concern, because your question was about what do I think the biggest problem in the world is, it is the lack of law and order, to put it nicely.
Okay.
The lack of law and order. When there are rules that are made for everyone's good and we follow them, it's amazing how well things get along. As I brought up in the very beginning, the Constitution, when it was followed to a T, we took off like a rocket. Economically, we thrived. Everything was terrific. As we get away from law and order, things spiral down. Everyone's agenda comes. Look at our dear friend Hillary Clinton. Look at the Clinton Foundation. They broke so many laws by selling influence. It's all coming out now. That's what puts a world in chaos. Look at the fact that we had a red line in Syria with ISIS, and they crossed it, and we didn't go get them. They are emboldened. Bad people are emboldened when good people do nothing. We are the good guys. The United States has always been the good guys. We've got to remain the good guys. I'm not saying we should be the world's policeman, but we've got to be the guy that says, hey, watch it, and if we say it one more time, we're going, and we go. Then they're like, got it. All it takes is one shot, and they get the picture. It takes a couple, we're going to do something, not doing anything, and they're like, oh, paper tiger, no problem. Look at what Putin did with taking Crimea. Look at how ISIS has thumbed our nose at us. We have to show the force that we morally have earned over the years of being the world's greatest liberator.
Yeah, it's interesting. Years ago, I was interviewing someone who was a constitutional conservative, and he really looked from a biblical worldview. And he said that in the absence of God, as we've become more secular as a nation, something has to fill that vacuum, and that evil has to fill that evil fills that vacuum.
That's probably the proper philosophical answer, yeah. When even Thomas Jefferson himself said, our nation is a nation that must be run with God as part of the equation. Because any other country that tries to run their lives without a true loving God, like the Christian God, they will become the ISIS God. They will become the Sharia law. They will become the God of the beheader. You're right, the vacuum will be filled. When good expands, evil must contract.
So one of the ways we would create law and order would obviously to work on being a godly nation, a godly people, but what else could we do to create law and order since it's all over the place?
Well, we have to get rid of political correctness.
Okay.
You know? It's one of those things. When you look at the NTSB, after they discuss an airplane crash, and you look at the Homeland Security and all the screenings, when they screen an elderly couple in their 80s, you just have to, or a 6-year-old kid, you got to be kidding me. Okay, no terrorist is younger than 10 or older than 70. We should get that right out there right now. There's just so many things that we do, and so we don't offend anyone. look at Israel. When's the last time Israel had a problem on one of their airplanes? Never. Since 1968 or something was the last time they had a problem. Because they know how to screen people. They can see what's going on. We need to be able to do that same thing. And we also have to be unashamed when we do pull over people on the highway or whatever. It's not about, cops shooting black people. They have it. If you look at the ratio, far fewer blacks get shot than whites. As a matter of fact, if you're a white guy getting pulled over, you're more likely to get shot if you do something stupid, because that's usually what the police's proper response is to take care of themselves first. So the Black Lives Matter movement, I think they're really muddying the waters here. And it's really too bad that we're not going back and saying, no, these are the facts. It's a tragedy when anyone gets shot unintentionally or unjustly. But to go out and riot and burn cities over it, that's not solving a problem.
I want to get back to your comment on screening and political correctness, because I know that as related to the threats of radical Islamic terror, there are those who believe that we should allow hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees into this country, into the state of Pennsylvania, in fact.
Right.
Let this be a safe haven. In the past, your opponent has been on my show, and he did talk about the fact that we need to vet properly, but we also need to be a compassionate people. There are those on Homeland Security and high-ranking security officials who would argue we do not have a way to vet these people. We should not let them in. What is your position on Syrian refugees?
Well, the most important thing when you're looking at allowing immigrants in, and we are a compassionate people. I don't believe there's a country on the earth more compassionate than America. Do they want to become Americans? Are they leaving where they came from because they want to become Americans? If they pass that criteria, I'm all for it. The problem is they don't. They are being pushed out because it's dangerous, because their country is in a crisis. You've got multiple factions, you've got rebels, you've got the oppressive nationalistic army that is basically killing everybody, and then ISIS is going in there and they're trying to take over it as their own country. So these people are being displaced. They do not necessarily want to become Americans. It'd be safer and cheaper and better for them if we create a safe area in their country that we can protect. When this civil war is over, they can then go back and live the lives that they lived before. To bring them here doesn't serve them because they don't want to be Americans. It doesn't serve us because ISIS has said, and they even bragged about it, we're going to infiltrate those refugees with terrorists. It's called a Trojan horse. It is,
and that's what they've done in Europe, in fairness. They've done that in Europe
They've done it in Europe. There are places where the police won't even go. They're called no-go neighborhoods. They won't even go into there because they're not welcome, they don't speak the language, and they'd be kicked out, which is really unbelievable to think about, that in a foreign country, their own police can't go into neighborhoods because of the neighborhood makeup. Look, I'm all about compassionate for the true refugees, the true people that want to seek asylum, but these people don't want that. We want them safe. They want to be safe. Keep them safe over there.
Okay. Speaking of safety, my next topic has to do a bit with safety, but it has nothing to do with over here. Back in September of 2012, our consulate in Benghazi came under attack, and we lost 4 Americans, including the first U.S. ambassador to be killed in about 30 years.
79, yeah.
There has been debate about whether there was a hearing held, a congressional hearing, whereby the families of the members of the fallen in Benghazi got to testify before Congress. And there was a debate whether Congressman Cartwright walked out of that testimony or if he had somewhere else to be, like a vote for something else on the floor that was important that he had to get to. Have you and the congressman discussed this issue at all, or have you challenged one another on this issue, or do you think his position as to what he did that day is clear?
I remember this was brought up in the debates in 2014.
Okay.
And he said, he had another vote to go for.
That's what I recall, that he had another vote.
He said that.
Okay.
And I did some research, and there was no vote that day. Because the first thing I thought of, well, if he and some of the other Democrats, and it was only Democrats who walked out.
That is correct. It was Democrats.
Walked out, and I thought, well, Darrell Issa, who was the head of the commission, he didn't walk out. There were other Republicans, and there were some other Democrats who stayed. So if he had to go for a vote, how come they didn't have to go for a vote? So then I went and looked on the docket of the House of Representatives roll call and the votes. The last vote was that morning. There was nothing that afternoon. So he simply didn't care enough to listen to the family's testimony. He got up and left.
Okay. And he would probably not say that. In fairness to him, he would probably...
I remember what he said because a person after the debate said something to him about it, and he said, I hope you don't think I'm the kind of guy who doesn't care, but I just had to go. I had to go. And we'll let the facts be as they are.
Okay. Shifting gears. What is your position on investing in transportation infrastructure for this region? I look around, I drive around the streets, and a lot of our bridges aren't looking so great, our roadways aren't looking so great. Your opponent has talked a lot about investing in transportation infrastructure. Where do you stand on this?
The roads and the bridges need to be fixed. Here's the problem. Remember the stimulus bill, 2009, $868 billion was going to fix everything.
Yes.
How much got fixed? Very, very little. Like, I don't want to say nothing because I saw the signs that this project and then remember when
shovel-ready jobs.
Shovel-ready jobs are ready to go. Well, guess what? Then Obama laughed about it. Well, I guess those shovel-ready jobs weren't so
shovel-ready. Yes.
Where did the money go, people? Where did it go? That's the question. So it seems like every election cycle, infrastructure, we need this. Hillary Clinton, we did $300 billion injection. Where did it go last time? I am all for fixing things. As Donald Trump said, we're $20 trillion in debt. That would almost be acceptable if everything was perfect. But we're still falling apart. So the money is going somewhere it shouldn't go. I am all for a federal government audit to find out, because I bet it's going to stink to high heaven. Almost $1 trillion just vanished.
Poof.
Poof, gone. It went somewhere. We know it went somewhere, but no one's talking about it. So every time they bring up roads and bridges and infrastructure, yes, I'd love to spend the money on it, but there has to be a mechanism to make sure it goes there, not just an allocation and then turn your back and then 2 years later, need to fix our roads and bridges.
Maybe it's in the same place that the $6 billion that's missing from the State Department went. You never know.
It could be.
It could all be there.
Maybe it was there with the emails and it got taken away. I don't know.
Do you support fracking for natural gas, and how is your position on fracking different from that of your opponent?
I absolutely support it. It is something that has turned us into the Saudi Arabia of the world. We didn't know how to do it. We didn't even know the stuff was there. We used to send $800 billion a year to the Middle East, people who didn't really like us. And we had to buy their oil. Well, now we don't have to buy anything from them. As a matter of fact, and Congressman Cartwright voted against this, oil exporting. We want to be able to export our oil because we have so much oil and natural gas here. That would make us a net export energy country, which would be terrific. I am for fracking. It is safe. It has been done since the 30s. 1930s was the first time it was done. It does not cause earthquakes. When done properly, which is really the only way it's done now, it's very safe. It goes 10,000 feet below the ground. You're not polluting wells. That Gasland movie, that was financed by the Saudis. Did you know that? The Saudi Arabians financed Gasland to scare Americans out of fracking so we would buy more energy from them.
Because we're so more independent on them, sure.
Right. So I give them credit. It was clever. But it's based on lies.
Well, and it's not just about energy independence. It's also about jobs for this region, and it would affect jobs in the 17th Congressional District.
Very much so, yeah. And we also need to continue our work with coal and everything else, because that is a very viable, affordable, and abundant energy source.
I want to get into the candidates for president for a minute with you, because you've brought up Clinton a few times. You've brought up Trump already. So I'm guessing that you are a supporter for Donald Trump for president, but I don't know, because you are a constitutional conservative, which he is not.
The thing about Donald Trump is, and that's a good point, I don't see him necessarily as even political. I see him as a guy who is a deep patriot, who loves this country, and is a problem solver. You don't become a billionaire and have all the properties he has and the enterprises he has without being able to solve problems regularly. And that is one of my big issues with our political people in general. They don't solve problems, they manage them. Why? See, when you solve a problem, the problem's taken care of and you become irrelevant after that. But if you manage a problem forever, I got to keep you in power, right? That's one of the reasons why healthcare never gets fixed, why so many things never get fixed, because these people still need to have their hands in the pie. Got to keep us in office because we're still working on this problem. Whereas a true problem solver solves problems. I do think he understands the Constitution and the beauty of it. I think he completely understands how it made this country as great as it is. But I don't see him as an ideological partisan, which I think is fine, because I'm sure there's going to be some things that he's going to annoy the Republicans about, just like he's going to annoy the Democrats. And that's okay. As long as he has the best interest of America first, I'm for him 100%. Now, Hillary Clinton, I don't I believe she sees things through a very different lens. She sees, and I hate to say it, what's in it for her. One of the reasons they had learned that she has her private server was she wanted to be able to conduct business without having to be open to transparent or Freedom of Information Act requests. And they have learned that she was brokering her husband, Bill Clinton, for speaking engagements. Once they would get certain amounts of money for the Clinton administration if she would approve certain deals when she ran the State Department as Secretary of State. I mean, for example, there's a reason why Russia has half of our uranium now. Because the guy, Justra, made a $100 million contribution to the Clinton Foundation. That's insane. That's un-American. I don't think that she really cares about people like she says she does. I think she says a lot of rhetoric. I think she uses a lot of words that she knows resonate with people. But I think deep in her heart, it's her first, and anyone else benefits, hey, that's okay. But I don't trust her.
Well, and one of the reasons that I wanted to ask you about this is because I haven't asked everybody running for Congress who's been on my show in the past who they support for president. I haven't. But in this case, your opponent was one of the first people to endorse Hillary Rodham Clinton for President of the United States. He has a very strong position in support of her. So I wanted to understand that position of support relative to where you stood.
Yeah, I haven't heard him say anything about Hillary lately.
No, has he been quiet?
He's been very quiet.
A lot of people have been quiet lately.
And the funny thing, I had him pinned as a Bernie guy. Because Matt Cartwright is as socialistically left as they come. And so is Bernie, obviously. But he's a Hillary person, so, you know. Actually, he had told me, he and I had a conversation not too long ago, he was a delegate for Bill in the 90s. So that's probably why.
Okay. We have a bit of time left, so I want to get into a couple of extra issues. I wanted to ask you about your position as regarding guns, the Second Amendment, and relative to your opponent.
I'm 100% supportive of the Second Amendment. I believe that the ability to defend yourself is crucial. One of the things that separates America from the other nations in the world is our ability to defend ourselves and to own weapons. Not crazy weapons, reasonable weapons. Could you imagine if, remember in Germany and Poland before World War II, they disarmed everybody. They said, we're such an evolved society, no one should really have a gun anymore. Could you imagine what those Nazi stormtroopers would think if they went to the ghettos to get the Jews and those Jews were armed?
Yeah, it'd be a very different situation.
First couple of Nazi, SS guards who got shot a couple of times or whatever, like, you know what, we're not going to go in there, you go in there. No, you go in there, Hans. No, you go in there, Fritz. No, they would have thought twice about it. But when you know your citizenry is disarmed, they're sitting ducks. And that's something that I'm glad it's the Second Amendment. I mean, the First Amendment is speech, religion, etc. The Second Amendment to defend yourself, not just yourself against a bad person, but against a bad government.
A tyranny.
And Thomas Jefferson said it best: when the government fears its people, we have freedom. When the people fear their government, we have tyranny. And tyranny can happen really quickly if there's no one stopping the bad guys.
Why do you want to be congressman?
Because I love my country and I cannot stand the direction it's going. Can't stand it. But I feel the weight. I feel the weight of excess regulation, taxation. I feel the weight of having our enemies not fear us and our allies not trust us. I feel the weight of seeing all these people on welfare who could be earning a living if there were jobs and having the dignity that comes with earning a living. That's a weight to me. When back in the day, when I was a young, happy kid in the 80s under Ronald Reagan, it was morning in America every day. That was when I started my racing career. That's when people were doing business deals and they were happy and just so productive. And then even in the Clinton years, after Newt Gingrich, when we got the welfare to work, it worked. People got off welfare rolls. We had a surplus for crying out loud. It was wonderful.
I have to wrap there. Matt Connolly, it's always fun. Thank you so much. Good luck on Tuesday. And remember, folks, when you look around and don't like what you see, don't complain about it. You can do something about it. You can vote, and thank you for watching.